I Hate Politics is a podcast about a human activity we love to hate. I'm Sunil Dasgupta. No matter what happens out there in the world, we will always have something to be thankful for, simply because we are still here. The last several weeks, the year of war in Gaza, 3 years in Ukraine, the mushrooming of authoritarian leaders the last several years. Not really in the mold of Hitler, but more like a Juan Perón in Argentina or Franco in Spain. Inept and yet enduring. Do lead us to be despondent. Feeling all this weight in this moment, I happened to chance upon an Instagram post by the local LGBTQ+ group MoCo Pride, which announced the elevation of a Kennedy High School junior and an Indian American person like me to the presidency of the group's youth section. And I thought, what is she like? How is she seeing the world right now? Several emails later, I was interviewing Richa Tripathi, who not only goes to Kennedy High School, is an Indian American person, but turns out is also a neighbor. With a hat tip to James Joyce, here is her portrait, that of a young woman as an activist. Stay with us.
I Hate Politics is brought to you by UMBC's Political Science Program, where you'll learn to shape public policy, impact communities, and function at the center of modern society. Learn more at shadygrove.umbc.edu.
I Hate Politics is a podcast about our neighborhoods, workplaces, schools and streets, and our local governments as they function in diverse and democratic societies. This means our politics are messy, dirty, sometimes corrupt, with often self-serving politicians. But no matter how much we may hate politics, we are never exempt from it, even when we refuse to participate. In fact, the purpose of politics is to keep society moving precisely when we don't agree with each other, like now. Music for this episode comes from the Washington, D.C. rock and roll band Door Sedan. Glenn Kowalski on vocals and guitar, Josh Singer on bass guitar, and Norman Vandersluis on drums. You can find their newest fall 2024 singles on Bandcamp. We use 2 songs, Neutral and Juniper.
Won't pick up my phone if it rings all night. Ask me anything, it's alright. I'll tell you I'm neutral. I'm really, really neutral. Yeah.
Richa Tripathi, welcome to I Hate Politics.
It's great to be here.
Let's start with, what organizations you're part of.
I'm currently the president of MoCo Pride Youth, which is a countywide social and advocacy-based GSA. And I'm also the director of LGBTQ+ inclusivity. It's a committee for the Lynn Harris student internship, and Lynn Harris is a sitting board member.
When did you start all of this?
Summer before my freshman year.
What led you to do this?
Honestly, I don't have a completely clear answer about that. It was mainly, I think, that MoCo Pride Youth accepted me as a policy director at around the same time when the Lynn Harris internship accepted me as an intern, and I chose LGBTQ+ inclusivity as one of my 2 committees. And I think that combination gave me a unique insight that not a lot of interns get into the world of LGBTQ+ advocacy, as opposed to a lot of the other issues that students work with. For example, racial justice, sustainability, newcomer issues.
Can I ask you if you identify as LGBT yourself?
Yes, I do. I'm not sure if I thought I did in freshman year. I was a questioning, a lot of people will say they're in a questioning phase when they're not exactly sure what they are. And I was definitely in that phase in freshman year. And I kind of got more defined with my identity over time.
Over time means what? Did you come out?
It's kind of hard to determine these days whether a person is out or not. I like to think that I'm out. I I'm not exactly sure myself, but like I know what I am now, or I know how to define myself so that other people like understand me, and I've also learned how to like talk about my identity.
You have Indian parents, so what do they think of all of this?
Well, I don't really talk to them about it, honestly. But um, again, I'm not sure if I'm out yet. I think they know.
Rich, I'm going to ask you, this is how they will find out.
I've done similar things to this before, and I feel like if they were to find out, that would have been long before this. I don't have any concerns about them hearing it like as a finality, like your daughter is queer thing. So like I don't have concerns about that at all. I never have. My parents are wonderful people. Yeah, I think that's it. It's just like not something that we talk about very often because they don't, I don't know, they've never challenged me on it, but they've never also like said anything on the contrary to my identity or my work.
Are you also active at Kennedy High School where you go?
No, I don't. And part of the reason for that is because Kennedy didn't have a GSA until this year.
Did you help establish one?
No, I didn't because there's not a huge demand for a GSA at Kennedy. It's not exactly like the safest place to like come out and say that you're queer.
I assume that you chose Kennedy. Parkland, your homeschool, feeds into Wheaton, I believe, but you chose Kennedy because it's part of the Down County Consortium. Why would you choose a school that is not friendly?
I chose Kennedy not for like its specific environment. I chose Kennedy for its program. So I got accepted to the Leadership Training Institute program at Kennedy.
I'm a little bit surprised, to be honest with you, that even with being at the Leadership Training Institute, I thought that program would be much more welcoming.
The program itself
Oh,
is specifically like very welcoming, actually. And there are a lot of students that I've met with in the program that are also queer themselves and not really afraid to show it. But it's like the bigger school environment that's a bit of like a problem, which is why I don't think a lot of queer students necessarily like number one feel the need to go to a GSA or like feel any sort of desire to given that environment.
What is the non-welcoming part of that school?
Well, it's more so one of those things where like nothing is ever directly said to you, but things are said. So if you go into the hallways of Kennedy, like there is a huge problem actually with a lot of different like slurs that people will say. One of them is the F slur. And that in of itself, people don't think it's a powerful insult, but it's a powerful word in of itself. And I think terminology important is also really powerful. But like situations like that where you'll hear someone like shouting the F slur across the hallways and not getting any consequences, or you'll hear like a lot of people who will make fun of their friends by saying you're gay and things like that. And that's generally like it goes unpunished, it goes unnoticed. And it just like there are spots within Kennedy where that's not as much of a problem. So, for example, I have a teacher who is queer herself. So she has this big collection of just LGBTQ plus history books. She's a history teacher, so it makes sense. And she like has all like she doesn't run a GSA, but she's always made her classroom a welcome space to talk about identity and things like that. And the leader of the GSA is also a teacher who has been very welcoming to students. And also one of the teachers that I liked because they shared their pronouns immediately as any all. So like it was established with students that wasn't like an okay thing to do. So there are spots within like I'm not saying that the teachers or the administration are necessarily like not focusing on this issue specifically, even though they're not. Like there are spots within Kennedy where it is safe, but those are a little fewer than I would prefer them to be. You know, I just like it's part of my greater desire for like the generations to come to be a little more inclusive and a little more mindful of their language.
Are you talking about your own generation, right?
Yes, definitely.
So, I mean, normally it's old fogies like me who don't get it right. But this is a problem with
In
your
youth too,
peers.
definitely.
Okay.
I think older generations like have not been exposed to a lot of the terms that we're discussing now for like a long time. So like sometimes I do like I meet very conservative people and like I'm okay with them because like there's number one, they're still people, but number two, I understand that like a lot of these people grew up in a very different environment. Ironically, I like it less when I meet people my age who like they might not necessarily be conservative, but they either don't understand the LGBTQ plus community or they understand it, know their stances on the issues, and make it a big deal to people like me. Because there are some people who will do that who are about my age. And that just annoys me because if you don't have something nice to say, don't say it.
So you're more forgiving of older people because we grew up at a different time with different sensibilities, and you're more annoyed with your peers because you expect them to have your sensibilities and they don't.
That sums it up well. Like even if you hold those beliefs, there are a lot of beliefs that I know, like, for example, I would not come up to someone and say, hey, I support LGBTQ plus inclusive facilities if I knew that they didn't. It's a sensitivity issue more so than in like a LGBTQ plus inclusivity issue in of itself.
You have Indian heritage.
Yes.
You have grandparents. Does that experience make you more forgiving of older people?
I'd like to think that growing up, going back and forth has made me more, yeah, indeed forgiving. And I think that's also made like some of the people around me in India very forgiving in my family. That's one of the reasons that I'm not officially out is I'm not exactly sure how my grandparents react specifically to that information. And I don't want to know.
What about your cousins? Are they welcoming? I mean, your peers that, are in your family in India or here?
Most of my cousins are not necessarily liberal, but a lot of them are moderate and are accepting.
So you said that these kids in Kennedy are shouting out the F word in the hall and nothing is said, nothing is done. But is it also the case that nothing is reported? Have you ever reported it?
No, because it's such a hassle to report things. And I understand that might be hypocritical. But it is actually kind of hard to report things. You do have to go to the office, you have to get things done. And after all of that, if you report something saying that at blank time, blank people came and said these words, if they don't know who you're talking about and they pull up the security cameras, even if they do that in the first place, then like a lot of the audio gets mixed up and you'd basically have to recognize the students. Even when you were to report a thing like that, like usually people will not do so unless it's something that was directed specifically to them. So for example, last year I was sitting with a group of friends during lunch and these two guys came up and said some really disgusting things that I will not say. Not about the fact that we were all queer, which we were, but about the fact that like we were predominantly made up of female students. A lot of like sexually explicit things. And then they just walked away. So then that was when I reported it, because that was directly to me. That was a lot easier to catch on a security camera. And I had specifics. I could go up to main office. I could go up to administration and say, this is what they said. This is how they made me feel. These are who witnessed this incident. But it's a lot harder to do something like that in a hallway, for example, or in a classroom where you don't necessarily know the people around you. So really, like, it becomes really hard in general to report things that happen in hallways a lot of people talk about things that happen in hallways and bathrooms specifically. And that's because these are common areas within schools where a lot of people are all the time. And that means that it's really hard for administration to be able to catch people, as opposed to situations where, for example, two guys come up to a group of girls during lunch in a specific area which has security cameras nearby and say specific things, and we can like recognize them if the security guards ask us to identify them, which is what they did ask us. So that's the differentiation, I believe, between reporting.
When you reported, was the administration welcoming?
Yes,
They took the complaint and you believe they acted upon it.
I believe so, yes.
Did anything change after that?
No. I mean, I don't think I ever got directly harassed again as badly as that. But I'm not sure, really. I'm not sure whether the environment changed or those students changed specifically.
Did you see those students still there in school?
No.
Now, you're also a person of color, and people use slurs around color all the time.
Yes. I've never had that experience at Kennedy because almost everyone is a person of color at Kennedy.
That suggests that you've had that experience elsewhere.
I'm a queer, female presenting person of color, second generation immigrant. Like, I'm a lot of things. I'm a lot of things that like give me a very specific minority group that has also given me like a lot of like given other people a lot of reasons to say things about me. So I have had that experience at my middle school, actually, where a lot of guys would say things about like either my ethnic origin or something I really resented was that there was another second generation immigrant Indian origin girl who's about a foot shorter than me and she wears glasses. And something they did all year was mix me up with her because we were the two Indian origin girls in the engineering program. So, like, things like that, plus they'd say things directly about my skin color. They never said anything about me being queer because I don't think I came out to them, so they wouldn't know. They did say things, like, a lot of these boys said things about, like, also some sexually explicit things. Never anything bad enough for me to report, but that's also because I have a pretty high threshold for, like, situations that bother me enough to do something about it. I think I've developed that over my life. So I'm also kind of less likely to report things. But I'm also like, I'm a pretty stable person. So I'm the type of person who can handle those situations. And I have in the past, but I haven't had to at Kennedy.
Isn't it incumbent on somebody like you who's a leader of the group to actually report it more often so that others who are not as stable and forthcoming and have the fortitude that you have displayed are not harassed? And that is the activism you chose.
At my middle school, a lot of these boys, their main goal was not necessarily to attack me based on my race or like my parents' national origin. Their goal was to annoy me. And so, like, in that situation, reporting things based on, like, identity, I would consider, like, personally was less effective because it only showed these boys that, like, these words are bothering you and they are annoying you, and that would make them do more. And I know because I had, like, personal experience where I did try that and it, like, they only ramped it up. So I developed that. I think it worked for me because eventually a lot of these things did stop. I get your point that like, it seems a little weird for a leader of the group to, like, not join a GSA or not, like, report things like these specifically happening to you. But, like, that's also, I do report things all the time. I reported those guys who said very sexually explicit things to my friends and I. And a lot of those happen, and a lot of the reason that I report things are because other people are at the scene, and I'm not the only one who's getting this direct reflection. And also because Like situations like that are where it wasn't done to annoy me. It was done because these people actually believed what they were saying.
What do you learn as part of your curriculum, or what books do you read that help you? What has been your academic interaction in on this account, or is that not part of your academic interest at all? Is there, for example, a queer book that you really love?
I have a couple that I really love, but I feel like a lot of my queer reading experiences have been pretty separate from like my advocacy work. So I got into queer literature like a year or two afterwards, and I feel like the developments between the two have been pretty separate because I never read about LGBTQ plus advocacy specifically. Actually, I could, but I haven't before, and yeah, I don't think so. I do have an English teacher for IB English who does like she hasn't necessarily talked specifically about LGBTQ plus advocacy, but she does have a lot of diverse authors in terms of like national origin, in terms of race, and like a lot of those topics to talk about identity. So I think like that helps.
Do you ever feel like stretched about doing all of this work?
Of course, everyone feels stressed at some point, or stretched out between groups, between organizations, and between issues. I think I'm one of the student advocates who has pretty set boundaries on that, though. And that comes from being around for a while. I never join more organizations or do more positions than I can handle. I've been very strict between like the different positions I have. So the top 3 right now are my 2 positions that I've talked about: MoCo Pride Youth, Lynn Harris Student Internship, and I'm the secretary of my Model UN. I do not commit to more leadership positions than that because I know I don't have the time, and I know I will stress myself out if I do.
Are you going to run for SMOB?
Yes, probably, maybe, I don't know. That's something that everyone talks about doing. I've been doing like student advocacy kind of since I was in 7th grade, and I'm a junior now. So it's been a while. I've like been through a lot of organizations, and I've left a lot of organizations.
Which ones did you leave?
I was forced to leave. Like, do you know the Montgomery County Junior Council?
Yeah.
Yeah. I had to leave them after I graduated from middle school.
You're not going to MCRSGA?
I've tried.
You didn't get in?
No, I didn't. I applied like as I was a rising freshman. Only like 5 freshmen are accepted per year. I expected that I probably wouldn't get the position. The reason that like I didn't apply again was because, well, number one, I had been set in my leadership position. Like in terms of MCR, I didn't apply again like this year, for example. Like I didn't see a specific focus that aligned with my goals.
In MCRSGA, there is not a focus on?
I haven't seen one. There might be one in the future.
If you're talking to folks even younger than you, now people in middle school, what advice do you have for them?
Number one is to find your passion, find your focus. So, like for me, that was LGBTQ plus inclusivity. That was the issue I wanted to work on. That was the issue I wanted to commit to. The other thing I said is that you should not overburden yourself with the amount of leadership positions that you're taking. I have 3 leadership positions and I still have time, and that's because I'm not part of my SGA, and I refuse to join the GSA because it would be too time consuming.
What do you do with that free time?
A lot of it is studying. I am an IB student, but with my free time, I also do things like I paint and I read different books. A lot of them are historical books, actually.
What kind of history?
One of my favorite books, which is pretty random, is this book I picked up at a thrift shop. It was called The Professor and the Madman. And it was about 2 of the guys who helped to create the first Oxford Dictionary, I think it was. And like one of them was a professor, and another one was like one of these like English geniuses who was in like an insane asylum. I do hang out with friends sometimes. Sometimes we talk, sometimes we prepare like debate platforms. I did say I have 3 leadership positions, but I'm also in other clubs, and one of them is debate. So like we talk about things like that. There's some friends whom like what we'll talk about is like religion and political situations across the world.
So when you talk about religion and politics, what are you saying?
Well, for politics, a lot of what we talk about is like political situations that are going on right now. So before the election, before the day of the election, a lot of conversations that I was having with a lot of these friends that I talked to about these things, is like the implications of Kamala Harris becoming president.
Do you have a sense of what you're going to do in college?
Yes, I think so. I'm going to probably go to pre-law and then law school, or something related to international relations or political science. I have a very specific field. I just need to figure out which specific career goes into that.
Richa Tripathi, thank you for taking the time.
Thank you.
What lessons can we draw from my conversation with young activist and MoCo Pride Youth President, Richa Tripathi? First, I hope you will find some time to listen to this episode together with your teen. I'd be really interested in getting reactions of her peers to this portrait. If you want to talk back to the show, or better still, have your teen talk back, it is easy. Record on your phone and email the file to producer@ihppod.org. Be sure to say your name, where you live, if you are a parent, grandparent, or a teenager, and we will run it on air. Second, I was struck by Tripathi's quiet confidence in her choices. She doesn't feel the need to join her school's GSA, which used to be the Gay Straight Alliance and is now known as the Gender Sexuality Alliance. But she's clearly engaged in advocacy in other ways. She chooses what to report and what she doesn't want to report, determining on her own what is malicious and what is not. She's forgiving of older folks who misstep, but less patient with peers of whom she expects more. Consider all this against the backdrop of purity tests in the advocacy space. Either you're fully in or you're a heretic. So many battle lines drawn generationally that Tripathi chooses not to follow. Third, my own children have long told me that to be successful at student activism, you must start in middle school, even in 6th grade. Tripathi, it seems, began in the 7th. Turns out the early bird catches more worms, and oh boy, there seems to be such a premium on early start in student activism. I have often wondered about young people who don't start young, who are unlike Tripathi, and find themselves moved by their passions when they're older. The problem is really wider. Those students who make up their mind on a line of study early on are sometimes better placed than those who find themselves later. To those parents, teachers, and others who have late bloomers, spare a thought for them too. Eventually, they will catch up. Don't give up hope. Lastly, in a country headed towards anti-immigrant harassment, if not outright discrimination, Tripathi's cultural facility, moving between the Indian and the American worlds, suggests a kind of ability we are going to wrongly devalue. And yet, how hopeful is it to hear her say that old people can be forgiven for our sins? That's all for this episode of I Hate Politics, where we aim to stem the decline in local news by working with community voices. Don't forget to tune in to our Tuesday morning news analysis. I Hate Politics is produced by me, Sunil Dasgupta, and assistant producer, Adama Gay, with support from University of Maryland, Baltimore County. I direct UMBC's political science program at the universities at Shady Grove in Montgomery County, where, among other things, we explore and learn about politics, government, and society close to home. Music for this episode comes from Washington, D.C. rock and roll band Door Sedan. Glenn Kowalski on vocals and guitar, Josh Singer on bass guitar, and Norman Vandersluis on drums. You can find their newest fall 2024 singles on Bandcamp. We use 2 songs, Neutral and Juniper. If you want to share your music on the show or know someone else who might want to, please email us at producer@ihbpod.org. I hope you'll subscribe and share the podcast as we bring you stories about politics close to you and to your home. See you next time.